Hi, and welcome to my little sewing space. I'm DJ from He Plus She, and today I'm going to share with you how to make an elastic casing using bias tape. This tutorial was a request of one of my followers on the blog. She was making New Look 6291 and having issues with creating the elastic casing for the neckline. She specifically asked for help with steps 7 through 10, so that's what I'm going to do in this tutorial. But keep in mind, this technique can be used for anything that you make that has an elastic casing. It's a great way to get a clean look on the inside if you don't have a serger or don't want to use your zigzag stitch. Alright, let's get our materials and let's get started. Now we're back with all of our materials. I'm not actually making anything from pattern 6291. I'm using a scrap fabric just to do a demonstration here. And as you can see, I've sewn the edges together just like I would if I was making the top for 6291. I also have my bias tape here. The pattern calls for 1/2 inch bias tape. But I have 3/4 inch bias tape, and it is double folded as required by the pattern. I also have some scissors here for cutting, and I have wonder clips, which I prefer over pins. Pay no attention to this sticker on here. Sometimes I just pull them off and stick them on something until I can throw it in the trash. So we're going to get started with step 7. Okay, let's talk about step 7. Step 7 asks you to machine base or use fusible webbing to flatten your seam allowance so that when you're threading the elastic through the casing, it doesn't get stuck under here. So basically what you're going to do, if you're using the machine to do the machine basting, you're just going to stitch with a large stitch or a wide width stitch down these edges so that when you thread your elastic through, it doesn't get stuck. And this is actually a temporary stitch, so once you've gotten your elastic in, you'll actually go back in and remove this basting stitch from the finished garment. Okay, so let's select our basting stitch. As I stated before, this is a temporary stitch that you'll take out at the end, and that it is a wide width stitch. And so I use this stitch right here as my basting stitch. It's very easy to remove at the end, and you do not need to backstitch at the beginning or the end of this stitch. Okay, let's get going. As you can see, I'm actually doing this on both sides of the seam allowance, and then I'm going to do it on both sides of the fabric. Now we have base stitched our seam allowance to our fabric. And just remember, I know it doesn't look great now, but this is a temporary stitch, so we'll be removing it from the finished garment. Let's get started with step number 8. So step number 8 asks us to 1, flatten out our bias tape, and to 2, create a new fold in the bias tape. So you're going to open up your bias tape like I just did. So your bias tape comes folded. Open it up, and then open it up one more time. And you'll see it gives you this nice crease right here. If you have the 1/2 inch bias tape, to create a 1/4 inch new fold like it asks, you're just going to fold it down to this nice crease that it already gives you. And you'll do that all the way down one side of your bias tape. And then we're going to go to the iron and iron in that new fold, and then iron this piece flat. Okay, so we're going to be doing 2 things: folding down to the crease at the top, and then we're going to iron in that new fold and then flatten or press out the folds that are down here. So I'm back with my bias tape with the new fold ironed in and the rest of it ironed flat. And we're going to move on to step number 9, where we actually attach the bias tape to the bodice. So here you can see we have both pieces. One of the things in step number 9 talks about having ends meet and folded under at one seam. It's referring to our bias tape here. We want to make a clean edge with the bias tape. So you're going to fold under one of your edge, the beginning piece, just a little bit, and go ahead and use your pins or your clips like I'm using to hold that in place. And you're going to just continue to pin all the way around. You can use as many or as few pins as you'd like. It doesn't really matter, whatever you're comfortable with. Some people use a whole bunch. Some people use 1 or 2, but as many as you feel comfortable with, go ahead and use them to help keep your pieces together and to have some stability while you're sewing. I'm going to go ahead and finish pinning, and then I'm going to come back and show you folding in the other end of your bias tape. Now I'm at the end of my bias tape, and I'm just going to fold under one more time at that end, and I'm going to take my clip and secure both ends together. So that's what it's talking about when it says to turning under and having ends meet at one seam, having raw edges under, raw edges even. That's what this is talking about. You're going to fold this under like this and just basically just stitch over that so that it has a clean finish once you're done. So just folding these under so you see that, and then we'll just stitch over it and it'll be a clean finish on the other side when we're done. Now we're ready to stitch our bias tape to the bodice, and the pattern in step number 9 calls for a 3/8 inch seam. So I'm going to go ahead and set the machine up with a regular stitch, just a regular straight stitch, and do a 3/8 seam all the way around. Go ahead and do yours, and we'll meet right back here. Now you see we've added our bias tape to the bodice, and we're going to move on to step number 10. In step number 10, the first thing it asks us to do is to understitch. If you are using pattern 6291, if you look at the very first page of the pattern, you'll see that there are sewing directions at the very top on the right hand side. Item number 22 under sewing directions explains what an understitch is. An understitch is basically when you take your seam allowance and you fold it up on your casing like this, and then you stitch on the facing, which in our case here is our bias tape. You stitch along the facing close to the seam, and it attaches or makes sure that your seam allowance is not in the way. It's actually attached to your facing, or in our case, the bias tape. So I'm going to go ahead and fold my seam allowance up to my facing, or the bias tape in this case, and then I'm going to stitch it really close to the seam with my bias tape or facing, as is described in the pattern, facing up. So you're going to stitch it with this side up, not the seam allowance up. Okay? Okay, so I'm going to start stitching on the edge on the side seam where there was an opening, where we did where we turned the ends in. I'm going to start stitching over here, and then I'm just going to stitch all the way around. So I just wanted to demonstrate this part, and as you can see, I am really close to the edge here with my stitching. Now, as you can see, I have done my understitch here. You can see my inseam is now attached to my facing or bias tape. And I'm going to cut this. Clip it, clip, clip. And that's one part of step 10. Now we're going to turn our bias tape to the inside like this. Turn it to the inside. And here I suggest that you take it to your iron and iron in this fold here, and then we're going to come back and we're going to stitch this in. Okay, so let's go iron and then come right back, and then we'll actually finish off our casing. Okay, so you see here I have actually gone to my iron and iron this down some to help me with stitching. Step 10 says that you can go ahead and pin it. So if you want to pin your bias tape or facing to your bodice, you can go ahead and do that. I'm not going to pin it. I actually went ahead and ironed it, so it's a little bit more stable, and it seems like it's going to stay in place while I stitch it. You're going to stitch here really close to the bottom edge of your bias tape or facing, and you'll do that all the way around, and you'll be done with your casing for your elastic. So let's go ahead and do that, and we'll meet back right here. I have stitched all the way around my casing at the bottom, and you'll notice that right here you have a little opening, which makes it very easy to thread your elastic through. So there it is. Our casing's all done. If you have any questions or just want to give some feedback on the video, feel free to do so. And follow me on Instagram at he plus she, on Facebook at he plus she, and on my blog he plus she.blogspot.com. I look forward to seeing you soon. Bye bye.